every now and then somebody coins a term that just feeds perfectly into the public psyche. It's adopted, and then it becomes a set descriptor. Well, I have a feeling that Gus Carter has done just that by describing very colourfully, can I just say, Scuzz Nation. Scuzz Nation looks very much like a country of a few years ago, only worse. It's a place where decay happens faster than repair, where crime largely goes unpunished, where the social fabric has been slashed, graffitied and left by the side of the road. A brilliant article. I'm going to welcome him to the show right now. Gus Carter, Deputy Features Editor at The Spectator. You've really encapsulated, Gus, what a lot of people know is going on. And it's not just in London. It's not just in the sort of, you know, more grimy burbs of big cities. I mean, one of the examples you give here is of a vape shop in Shrewsbury that claimed to have, not a vape shop, a barbers, that claimed to have a £1.8 million turnover. Wherever you live in the country now, you can see that there's a proliferation of crime, of people essentially just taking the proverbial and nothing being done about it. The gradual, it's not even gradual, the rapid degradation of something that we all hold as dear and treasure. Talk to us about Scuzz Nation.
Yeah, well, essentially, and thank you very much for having me on, Alex. What I saw was like a whole load of different processes, a whole load of different examples of how the UK is becoming kind of just a little bit worse in lots of different ways. I find a way of describing that in a simple, easy way to sum up. Recognize, as you said, it's something like 7 in 10 people think that the country is getting worse. When you look at polling on whether or not people are proud of the place that they're from, it's been on the decline for decades. And the reasons for it are quite straightforward, actually. I mean, I spoke to the pollster Luke Trill, who was carrying out polls before the local elections, and he was saying that across the board, everyone he spoke to was saying that the country is effed up and a shambles. And I think it's just something that we all know. So what I was trying to do was tying together some of my experiences of what I call Scuzz Nation, but then also some of the statistics that bear out what we are all witnessing.
Yeah, let's talk about some of those statistics. Let's talk about some of the characters as well. The one I'm most fascinated by is Goat Man. You write that in one ward in Runcorn, this is after the recent by-election that Reform snatched Labour's 16th safest seat, and they lost it by just 6 votes. Residents said that there was a neighbour who filled his derelict house with goats and burned the animals' manure in his garden. And despite various people phoning up the authorities, nothing was done. Who is Goat Man?
I know, it's an extraordinary story. Basically, I was talking to a Labour campaigner who was up there at the time, and she had been drinking with one of the MPs afterwards, and they were discussing the fact that, you know, they'd lost by so few votes, and if you added up the people that live next door to Goat Man, they may just have clinched it. I think it's such a perfect emblem of what's going wrong in this country. When people do behave in this kind of way, the authorities just seem unable or unwilling to deal with it.
Do you know where Goat Man was from by any chance?
I don't. I do know that he was somewhere in Runcorn.
Yeah, I'd be interested to find out that, because the other thing you talk about here, and I'm sort of going through and looking at some of the highlights, but you speak about the barber shop with the £1 million plus turnover, you know, and 7,000 people. You talk about 1 in 5 Albanians here has been arrested, 1 in 36 is in prison. You also mention a Polish street scammer trying to defraud a member of the public next to Victoria Station. When you called 999, the police couldn't arrive for at least an hour. You also talk about cocaine deaths. And the one thing that I know when I look at organised crime, the statistics on it, and there's a brilliant website, I don't know if you know it, the Organised Crime Index is brilliant. You should go on it if you don't know it. One thing that's clear is a lot of the organised crime in this country is done by foreign gangs. And I wonder if you've actually made a connection somewhat between mass immigration and what has led to some of the scenes you're describing here.
Yeah, I certainly think in some instances there is certainly a connection. I mean, I quoted the Home Office, which said, and I quote, Albanian gangs act as the main wholesaler to powder cocaine retail operations in the UK. You know, it's something that the government is aware of. Yeah, of course, in situations like that, it is connected to immigration. I used to work in the courts, and I was going back through some of my old copy while I was writing this piece, and I found the case of an Algerian asylum seeker in his teens, and he had been mugging people at knife point in London. And when the police arrested him, they found on his phone a photograph of him wearing a watch of one of the tourists that he had mugged the night before. But then the police just released him on bail, and guess what he did? He carried on carrying out knife point muggings. You know, it seems unbelievable to normal people that this is how we behave. But this is the reality that Britain, Scuzz Nation, has found itself in.
How do we de-scuzz ourselves? That's the big question. I mean, I think it's a loaded question, because I'm sure there's lots of miracles that need to be performed to wind back the clock 10, 20 years and go back to a civilized society where the concept of shame still exists.
Yeah, look, I think it's such a difficult question, because there are so many different parts of our public life and our public institutions that have been degraded. I mean, I think one of the places to start is looking at prisons, right? We've increased our population by millions of people, and the number of prison places simply hasn't caught up. We also have a situation where the courts have longer and longer backlogs, and no one seems to be able to deal with it. So it can come down to quite bureaucratic sounding things like the number of sitting days in courts, and making sure that there are enough judges to hear cases. But if we want to deal with issues like this, then we're going to have to deal with the perpetrators.
Yeah, I mean, again, you talk about we've increased our population, done nothing about increasing resources. To me, it does seem to come back to mass migration. And this idea that when people come into this country, and this is by no means all people who come to this country, there'll be plenty of people, probably the majority of people who come to this country, come here for the right reasons, want to integrate, have a huge fondness for Britain. I mean, I think of my own next door neighbours from Turkey, right? They've come to Britain, both brilliant. One's a scientist, one's a doctor. And they came to Britain to have England and put their son through the English education system. And they live in London. They're like, we haven't moved to England. What is this? Even they're disturbed about what they've found in London. And I do wonder how much we need to begin addressing the fact that when people come to this country who don't have our interests at heart, the Albanian criminal gangs and the like, who are here essentially just to be parasitic of our economy and actually profit from crime, that we need to wake up and get real about that. And that would be the first right step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I didn't talk about it that much in this piece, but I mean, my view of this is that it is essentially our problem. It is a problem of our ability to ask people, to encourage people to integrate. You know, as far as I'm aware, we still don't have particularly strict language rules when it comes to people moving to this country. It is a lack of confidence in who we are as a people and what we believe in and what our culture is. So that what happens is we end up with people coming over here, and quite normally, by the way, quite understandably, they stay within the communities that they are from. That's how people feel comfortable. But we need to work harder to make sure that people feel British and feel proud to be British once they've moved here.
It's a tall order after all this time, Gus, but absolutely brilliant article. You're a fantastic writer. So enjoyable talking to you about that. Keep up the good work. That was Gus Carter.